three phases to healing the emotional body. The first phase is trigger. So this is a phase where you're quite agitated by that wound or that thorn or that memory. And during this phase where you're triggered, you're agitated, you can be very nostalgic, you can be very sentimental, you can feel quite stagnant, as though you're not moving forward, but you're not moving backward. You're kind of in this purgatory state where you keep reminiscing on what was said and what happened. This is usually the phase where you experience the self-judgment, or the being very critical and very hard on yourself, and you can even be quite aggressive towards yourself or quite aggressive towards the other individuals involved in the sort of discord or conflict that has led to this sort of emotional ache or emotional pain. So during the trigger and the agitation phase, that is a time of self-awareness. Usually that's a time where we are guided to introspect, to contemplate, even to journal. Journal out our feelings, or even to participate in therapy or sort of a self-hypnosis, where we can really discover these wounds, right? And really look at these memories, and we can look at them from judgment. But how we move into the second phase of healing the emotional body is through having this non-judgment and through cracking open the emotions, using compassion as our tool. And that can be through a meditation, that can be through like forest bathing, that can be through flowers, creating an altar that has flowers. And overall, a sort of a self-awareness is also sort of redirecting the mind. So that can be that's what's really going to pioneer someone from the trigger, the agitation, and that kind of sort of aggression into the next phase, which the next phase is withdrawing. So that's where we withdraw, and that's where we can feel this emptiness, like this sort of, being emotionally bankrupt, right? Where we withdraw, we can feel this quite this sort of dissatisfaction, or this sort of loneliness, or this sort of even depression. And that's where we have this sort of guilt that comes up, or this sort of regret that can come up, right? Or, I did the wrong thing, they did the wrong thing. And basically this period of, withdrawing or feeling like emotionally bankrupt is really all of these sort of feelings that kind of pouring out, like you feel like you're really pouring out your soul, basically, right? You're pouring out your soul, or your soul is really kind of coming into you, is really to help you bring fairness to the situation, right? To bring fairness is to seek a path of like emotional maturity, and to bring this sort of fairness to your life. And usually in that period where we're you could say withdrawing of these really heavy emotions, we are withdrawing them, purging them, cleansing them, you could say purifying them, so that we can really start to bring more of a fairness, which is really about a neutral state, right? Where it's not he said, she said, this wrong, this right. It's really about having this neutral state where we take that experience, and we take that experience, and we really start to build strength around it, and start to build this deep, you can call humanness, right? Which, in this planet, all of us have experiences that are quite trying, that it really makes you more of a human or less of a human. So in this phase, you have the opportunity to become more of a human, which can seem very intense, or you can become less of a human, which is kind of like numb out and just be quite scared, frankly, to be a human being. So in choosing the path of being more human is usually a path of like using that self-discovery of whatever the wrong, whatever the injustice, whatever the major imbalance, and really use that to become more human, which is about the pursuit of fairness within yourself or within a situation, right? And that's how we really end the karmic wheel of the repeating of these past mistakes, right? Or the sort of denying and ignoring ourselves and our feelings feelings, which really makes us more mechanical as a human than actually human. And then the last phase, so we went from being triggered, agitated, to went to withdrawing, right, which is like kind of that emotional bankruptcy where you're pouring out your soul kind of thing, right, and this great guilt or remorse, right, or to find that sort of equilibrium, to find that neutral state, to be more human instead of less. And then we get to the sort of relapse, and that is where you kind of come full circle, and that could take years, right, where you're like, let's, for example, you had a trauma in your childhood, like let's say your father abandoned you or something at age 7, and the relapse is you're coming back to that, right, you're triggered, something brings that up, maybe you see somebody who looks just like your father and it's just like, whoa, it just triggers it, and then you go through the whole thing again, right, with the trigger, and then you go through the withdrawing of the pouring out your soul, right? But when you get to this sort of relapse, it's like you're different, yet your response to that experience, that sort of pain or that ache or whatever that thing is, that wound, is you have this sort of understanding with it where you're not so grief stricken, right? You're not so hard on yourself about that anymore, right? There's this, what we call, you could say, acceptance, where you've detached yourself from that, right? You've allowed yourself to look at it from, you could say, the bigger picture. And usually in this phase where you're, breaking free and really, recovering, right, is really when you start to really step into the creativity of it, right, where you're using that to really step into like your sacred sexuality or your sacred creativity, or really you're using that to really push you or even challenge you to become soulful, right, which is like transmutation, like transmuting that whatever experience, right, there's many that we've experienced throughout time and the human condition, and you're using that to basically fuel your soulfulness, and that is what gives you this creative fulfillment where you're starting to take it and you're starting to sort of put it out there in the world in a way to encourage other individuals to find their neutral state, right, or find their acceptance, or find their ability to transform. So this is the 3 phases to healing the emotional body. Now again, this is, this can take years for many people. Sometimes people never really fully recover, right? But those who do recover from these, these human conditions that can be quite, a struggle, usually are the individuals who have this sort of command towards creative fulfillment, which I think is the sort of great mastery of the human realm, is to transmute and to transform that into a creative fulfillment, which is sort of liberating yourself and gaining instead of gaining the impact, which is like the attack of it and the sort of belittlement of it, but to gain the power of that, which is the awareness of where you're on. You're on this planet. You have ethnicity, you have nationality, you have childhood, you have history of your planet and where it has been. And that kind of gives you this great sort of understanding of where you're at, what's going on. And in that awareness actually makes you a lot more, you could say, has a greater discernment. You're more vigilant, you're more aware of like, this is what's going on in the planet. And also in that you also have a greater willingness to actually be human, which some people prefer not to be. But those who do are individuals who are wanting and commanding themselves to really take the virtues of what you gain when you recover, such as like perseverance or patience or tolerance or compassion or personal power, and really start to build that up even more so. So thank you, and may this kind of feed your soul.